We've all experienced this monster before. Lag. It's the devil. So I'm going to explain how we can remove it. Now, I've touched on this earlier, but I did make a few mistakes and I didn't really cover it that well, so I'm going to dedicate this whole issue to one episode. This is how you reduce lag. Now, first of all, there's two types of lag. There's server client-side lag and there's frame rate lag. If you don't know what those two things are, well, the frame rate lag is where, as you can see, my frame rate starts to go down. It's about 30 frames per second at the moment, which isn't too bad. But if I max out my settings, you will be able to see the effect that frame rate lag has in a moment. It shouldn't take too long because I deliberately picked this world so you can experience it. Okay, it's gone down to 17 now. We're back to up to 30. Alright, so my computer's handling this pretty well, except it's taking a while to load the chunks. And you'll notice that gravel over there was just taking a while to fall, wasn't it? And you notice when I was falling there, it takes a while before you see the particles. That's kind of server client-side lag, and it's very, very annoying when you hit a mob and it takes ages before it actually gets registered. And it's even more annoying when you try and mine a block and suddenly it reappears in your face and you teleport 10 blocks backwards. See, look at that. It's awful, isn't it? So my first tip to you is be careful about big amplified worlds like this. This kind of world is very, very laggy. You're rendering blocks from bedrock layer all the way to the sky, and because of the way chunks are rendered, they render the whole y-axis. This can be very, very dangerous for your Minecraft and lag. Another thing, avoid fill commands wherever possible. In the Nether, it was very, very laggy in one of my command modules, and I couldn't figure out why it was so laggy. Until I removed all the fill clocks in the game. You see, there was an exploit where I could obtain water in the Nether, and the way I went about this, really dumb, was to make every zombie pigman in the Nether have a fill command around them with blocks. Now I'm talking 32,000 checks per zombie pigman. That is not a clever way to manage lag. In fact, it's horrible, and that's why I removed it, and suddenly there wasn't any more lag in the Nether ever again. In addition to this, watch your entity count. That's this thing right here. There's 135 in this world at the moment. I've covered this in another episode. But if you have many, many entities in the world, then this can cause mostly frame rate lag, but it can cause a bit of server client lag as well. Now, this is when the entities get in ridiculous numbers, like 800s, let's say. Same thing for particles as well, but that mostly causes frame rate lag as well. So how did I manage the entities? Well, I created a command module, which currently isn't working because of the way players die, and it's really annoying. It basically kills all items outside of a radius of 32 blocks of you. Now, I know this isn't really practical, but I have had ways of going around it so you can save your items, but basically it reduced my entity count by a lot, and therefore prevented a lot of the potential lag in the world. Now I'm going to show you 3 commands which will make your world a lot less laggy. First one is game rule log admin commands false. Plop that in and your admin will stop logging commands. Duh. But it's very important because it would stop it from logging things that happen, let's say, 20 times a second, which is the case for a lot of command mod packs. And then there's game rule send command feedback. You'll notice that when I press that, it tells you that, obviously, but it's false. And now every time I type in a command, like tp at p, it won't tell me that it's happened, right? So that's just another way of reducing lags very slightly. I'm not even sure if it does it at all, but it's best to leave it off just in case. And then game rule command block output false, which will stop your command blocks from telling you everything it's doing. The next thing is stop commands from being run if they're not necessary. Scoreboard players set at all test 0. Now this might be important if the score doesn't exist at all, but if you already have a score, then it would be wise to do this. Score test minimum equals 1. Now this command is only going to be run when absolutely necessary. Next thing I want to warn you about is blocks that constantly change. Now you will remember in one of my command guesser videos that I had a waves module, and that place was very, very laggy because the water was constantly changing all the time. So avoid big waves of water, maybe millions and millions of vines. I've played some CTMs sometimes and they love their vines, don't they? But the problem is that the vines are constantly growing, and then sometimes it makes some areas completely unplayable due to the lag caused by vines. Next thing is, if you have very, very hefty commands, which are running at 20 times per second, it is probably wise to make them run on a hopper clock or a redstone clock. Now I do realize that these cause block updates, but if the command itself causes block updates or has to do very large checks, then it might pay off. Another point, watch out for lighting updates. Now this is a very large column which has created a very large dark spot right here. So now if I break it, you'll notice a very sharp lag spike will occur. Especially, yep, there we go. You notice that? Very laggy every time I shut off the light. So you need to be careful about lighting updates. Having glowstone and redstone torches constantly activating and deactivating is probably not the best idea. In conclusion, be careful of large checks, be careful of block updates, like this grass about to turn into dirt. Run commands only when needed. Remember the game rules. There's also game rule random tick speed 0, but that will stop crops from growing and leaves from decaying and so on. Careful of entities and particles, you don't want too many of those in your world. Be careful of amplified worlds, Exhibit A. There we go. And be careful of your video settings, because if you have 32 chunk render distance with fancy graphics and maximum smooth lighting, don't expect you will have a good time unless you have NASA's computer and server.